Now, there's a fair chance that many people watching this are going to think this all sounds great, nod their heads a lot, and then, well, just completely disregard it and never do any of it. Unfortunately, most of us won't make the changes necessary to get what we want out of life. But I don't want that to be the case for you. I want this video series to be different. I want these to be the videos that cause you to actually start making those changes. And to that end, it's worth trying something called fear setting. This is a concept that once again comes from the very wise Tim Ferriss and his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which will make for some excellent further reading. So, what is fear setting? Essentially, this is a tool that you use to overcome your fears by making them more concrete. It is the opposite of goal setting. Instead of writing down your goals, you're going to write down all the things that you're afraid of. So, let's say that you think you want to become a self-employed entrepreneur. It sounds great on paper, but you're afraid. Here's why. You might fail and be humiliated. You have a family to support. What if you can't get your job back? You don't have any funding for your idea. Now's not a good time. You've just had a child. Your wife might leave you. You might end up homeless and alone. So those are some fears and some worst-case scenarios. Suddenly, your dream doesn't seem quite so appealing. But wait, now what you're going to do is go through each of those points and A, score them out of 10 in terms of likelihood, then B, write down how you will cope in each situation. Be honest and realistic. Okay, let's talk about the first one. You might fail and be humiliated. Well, I say that would be a 7 out of 10. You have a family to support. What if you can't get your job back? I'd rate that at 6 out of 10. You don't have any funding for your idea. Well, I suppose that's 10 out of 10. Now's not a good time. You've just had a child. 9 out of 10. Your wife might leave you. 3 out of 10. You might end up homeless and alone. I would say that was only 1 out of 10. Sure, you can't argue with the fact that you have just had a child, although whether or not this is a bad time is debatable. Likewise, you either do have the money or you don't. But it's not that likely that your failure will be humiliating as such. Likewise, your wife would have to be pretty harsh to leave you, give her more credit than that. And you certainly won't end up on the street. Apart from anything else, you probably will get your job back. Worst case scenario, you might have to take a less good job or go begging to mum and dad or the government. Not ideal, but you would survive. Now we're going to look at how you cope with any of these things happening and how you're going to mitigate the risk, thereby making it even less likely to happen. Okay, let's look at the first one. You might fail and be humiliated. Well, you don't actually need to tell anyone that you're trying. Likewise, though, why does it matter what people think? At least you tried, and you never have to give up. You can just change your strategy, so there's no failure to report. You have a family to support. What if you can't get your job back? As mentioned, there are plenty of options here. Go for a worse job for a while, working in a supermarket if necessary. Get benefits, ask your parents for help, even make money from your own entrepreneurial efforts. You can probably survive on your savings for a few months at least. But more to the point, there's no need to quit your current job at all. If you want to set up a business, then all you have to do is set it up on the side by doing it at weekends and in the evenings. Eventually, you'll get a good idea as to whether it's going to be a success or not, and only then do you quit your job. Zero risk involved. You don't have any funding for your idea. Well, most business models can be bootstrapped. In other words, you can create a model that starts with no investment necessary and then reinvest the money you make back into the business as it grows. For example, a website is free to create, and the money you generate can be reinvested into inventory for that e-commerce store that you dreamed of. How about Kickstarter? They're always a good place to look for money. Now is not a good time. You've just had a child. Well, let me tell you something. There is never a good time. If you wait for all your stars to align, then you'll never do anything. And besides, would your child rather you were wealthy or happy? Your wife might leave you. Well, this won't happen, but if it does, then she probably isn't the right one for you anyway. Seriously, if you can't do the thing that makes you happiest and be in that relationship, then you won't be happy. But it can certainly help to sit her down, to tell her how much this means to you, and to show her your plans in detail. You might end up homeless and alone. Again, that's not going to happen. But if it does, well, then you'll pick up the pieces and try again. You can always crash on a friend's couch in the meantime, or work online to earn enough for a hotel. The point is, the worst case scenario is not normally as bad as you think it is, and there are almost always ways that you can cope. And anyway, what's more frightening? Those things happening and you living a full and interesting life? Or remaining in a job you find soul-destroying and boring for your whole life? Not taking a risk is the only way to guarantee that you won't be happy. So take the risk. This fear setting can be used in all kinds of situations too. This is true whether you're going to be approaching a girl or a guy in a bar, or whenever you're going to be asking your boss for that raise. A common fear with asking someone out is that they might say no. So how can you mitigate that risk? Well, try this. Smile at the person from across the room first and see how they react. If they smile back, then you have a good chance of them being receptive to your approach. But if they look away, then you've been rejected in a way that had no repercussions and wasn't at all embarrassing. You mitigated the risk. When you get good at this, fear setting is something that you can do automatically in your head every time you're approaching a challenge or a decision that you find nerve-wracking. This is actually a basic form of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. We'll talk about this more in the future, but it's definitely something you should look into more yourself as well.